The cold was the first thing I felt, a damp, bone-deep chill that seemed to leach all the warmth from my soul. I opened my eyes to the familiar, hated sight of a torn calendar hanging on a cracked mud wall. The portrait of the great leader was faded, but the date was seared into my memory. December 29, 1977. I had been reborn. My name is Lin Yu, and this was the day my destiny had been stolen from me in another life. The day the college entrance exams were reinstated, a beacon of hope for millions, and the day my own mother had tried to extinguish mine. The drafty wooden door creaked open and she entered, her figure silhouetted against the gray winter light. In her hands was a bowl of steaming soup. My heart clenched, a painful, familiar ache. I knew what was in that soup. I had lived this before. Lin Yu, my mother's voice was deceptively soft. Drink this. It will warm you up. In my previous life I was the one forced to marry the town's most undesirable bachelor, a man named Feng Jian, crippled, poor and considered ugly. He would later become the first person in our province to earn 10,000 yuan, and together, riding the wave of economic reform, we built a business empire worth billions. But that, together, was a lie everyone believed. It was I who had built it, I who had sacrificed everything, only to be cast aside by him and the sons I raised once the wealth and power were secure. I died neglected and full of regret, a ghost in my own gilded life. Meanwhile, my younger sister Mei Ling had taken my university spot and married a prestigious army officer, Colonel Chen Wei. Her life, which from the outside looked like a fairy tale, was in truth a private hell of daily abuse. Chen Wei, haunted by demons from his military service, was a violent man. He died disgraced and miserable, and Mei Ling's life was left in ruins. Now history was repeating itself, but with a cruel twist. Feng Jian had seen Mei Ling in town and become obsessed. He'd brought his life savings of 30 yuan to my mother, demanding to marry her. My mother, tempted by the money but unwilling to sacrifice her favorite daughter, had decided I would be the sacrificial lamb. But as I stared at the bowl of drugged soup, a figure moved in the doorway. "I'll do it," Mei Ling said, her voice clear and decisive. She stepped into the room, her eyes meeting mine. In them, I didn't see the naive younger sister I remembered from our youth. I saw a cold, calculating glint, a knowledge that shouldn't have been there. That was when I knew. Mei Ling had been reborn. She thought she was stealing my brilliant future. She believed that by marrying Feng Jian she would secure the wealth and comfort I had enjoyed. What she didn't know was that Feng Jian was a lazy, greedy gambler who owed all his success to my backbreaking work and ingenuity. She saw the glittering peak of the mountain but had no idea of the treacherous climb required to reach it. "Mei Ling, don't be foolish," I said, my voice cold. "We're talking about Feng Jian, the most notorious bachelor in the county. Mother has a much better match for you." My mother, startled out of her initial shock, lowered her voice. "The officer in the city, his name is Chen Wei. He comes from a powerful family, a pillar of the nation. They've even promised his wife a chance to attend university. It's a golden opportunity." At the mention of Chen Wei's name, Mei Ling's face paled. The memory of his fists, his temper, the misery of her previous life, flashed in her eyes. She recoiled as if struck. "No," she said, her voice tight with a fear I understood all too well. "I trust my own judgment. If I marry Feng Jian I will have a good life. Let Lin Yu marry Chen Wei." She shot me a look of pure, unadulterated triumph, believing she had outmaneuvered me. Just then Feng Jian appeared at the door, his grin wide and gap-toothed. Without a backward glance, Mei Ling walked out with him, choosing the devil she didn't know over the one she did. My mother, furious that her preferred plan had collapsed, turned on me like a viper. Her disappointment was a physical force in the small room. "You," she spat, her kindness vanishing. "You ungrateful girl. Since Mei Ling has thrown herself away, you are all I have left. You will marry Chen Wei and you will do it now." She stalked over to the small wooden chest where I kept my most precious belongings and pulled out the envelope I had received just the day before. My admission letter to the prestigious Capital University, for the Department of Electronic Mechanics. My ticket to freedom. My future. "Please, Mother," I begged, the memories of my last life's desperation crashing over me. I fell to my knees, the cold dirt floor seeping through my thin trousers. "I will study hard. I will make money and send it all to you. Just let me go to university. Please don't tear up my letter." She looked down at me, her expression one of utter contempt. I broke my back raising you. I won't waste more money sending you to school. That 30 yuan from Feng Jian will give us a better life. An Chen Wei's bride price will secure Mei Ling's dowry. Your duty is to this family. And with that she ripped the envelope in two. The sound was like the snapping of my own bones. She tore it again and again, until my dreams were nothing but confetti in her gnarled hands. She threw the pieces into the clay stove and I watched, numb as the flames consumed them, turning my future to ash. That afternoon, a man named Zhang Wei, a former urban youth who now worked as a matchmaker of sorts, arrived. He was the one who had brought the proposal from the Qin family. The colonel comes from a powerful lineage, Zhang Wei explained to my mother, his voice respectful. He fought bravely for our nation, but his missions left him with mental scars. He is particular, which is why he remains unmarried. His parents believe a city girl is too delicate. They want a sturdy, pretty country girl who can care for him. The wife will be given the chance to study. My mother, seeing her last chance, practically shoved me toward Zhang Wei. Take her. She is sensible and strong. She will do. There was no discussion, no consideration for my wishes. I was a commodity to be sold. As I gathered my meager belongings, a single change of clothes and a small broken radio that had been my father's secret gift to me before he died, I made a decision. I would go with Zhang Wei. I would meet this Colonel Chen Wei. But I would not be a passive victim of fate again. I would use this opportunity, however grim, as a stepping stone. I needed his influence to get back into university. That was my only goal. The journey to the city was a blur of jolting buses and bleak landscapes. Zhang Wei chattered nervously, filling the silence with praises for the Qin family's wealth and status. I barely heard him. My mind was a whirlwind of plans and memories, of a past life of gilded sorrow and a present life teetering on a knife's edge. We arrived at a grand old house in the heart of the city. It was an ancestral compound, slightly worn at the edges but speaking of generations of wealth and power. Zhang Wei and I stood in the cavernous living room, the air smelling of old books and polished wood. Then he entered. Colonel Chen Wei was tall and ramrod straight, his military bearing unmistakable. He moved with a controlled power that was both impressive and intimidating. His features were sharp, his eyes like chips of black obsidian. They scanned the room and settled on me, pinning me in place with their intensity. He studied me for a long, silent moment, his lips a thin, unsmiling line. Lin Yu, he stated. It wasn't a question. I simply nodded, my throat too dry to speak. Zhang Wei hurried forward, bowing slightly. Colonel, Lin Yu is known in the village for her quick mind and gentle nature. She's been studying on her own and was even accepted into Capital University. She's very clever. Chen Wei waved a hand, cutting him off. I'll see to your transfer back to the city. Thank you for this. His gaze flickered to me again, a dismissive, almost weary glance. Understanding the dismissal, Zhang Wei bowed again. Then I will trouble you, Colonel. I must return to the village. He gave me a final, almost pitying look before scurrying out. Suddenly I was alone with Chen Wei. The silence in the room was oppressive. I could feel the weight of his gaze, the unspoken rules of this gilded cage. I knew I had to speak now before I lost my nerve. Colonel Chen, I began, my voice steadier than I felt. My admission letter to Capital University was burned by my mother. Could you help me? I need to prove my acceptance to the school. His brows drew together instantly, a storm gathering on his brow. You are already making demands of me? I fell silent, the rebuke feeling like a physical slap. I remembered the stories of his temper, his PTSD. I had to tread carefully. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a low, commanding tone. Before anything else, you should know 3 things. First, I cannot stand a woman's crying or screaming. Second, I will provide for your material needs, but do not expect any emotional attachment from me. Third, you must accept that another woman, Su Lin, and her son live in this house. They are under my protection. I was stunned. Su Lin. She had been a childhood friend of mine who had married my elder brother. My brother had died on a mission where he saved Chen Wei's life. The pieces clicked into place. This marriage wasn't Chen Wei's idea. It was his parents'. He was a filial son, obeying their wishes while his heart belonged to another woman, the widow of the man who had died for him. No woman from a good city family would accept such conditions. So they had come to the countryside to find one desperate enough. In that moment I saw my opening. I saw the chink in his armor, his own reluctance. I looked him directly in the eye, a boldness born of 2 lifetimes surging within me. "Colonel Chin," I said, my voice clear. "I know this marriage was arranged by your parents. You feel obligated, but you are unwilling. I understand." His eyes widened slightly, surprised by my bluntness. "I am not here to trap you," I continued. "If you help me get into university, we can delay this marriage. By the time I graduate, perhaps circumstances will have changed and it will no longer be necessary." He stared at me, his expression unreadable. I had upended his expectations. He had anticipated a clinging, grateful country girl, not someone who saw him as an obstacle to be negotiated with. He was about to respond when a voice, sweet as a silver bell, rang out from the doorway. "Chin Wei." I turned. A stunningly beautiful woman stood there, dressed in city clothes that seemed to shimmer. She held the hand of a small boy. Her eyes, full of warm affection, were fixed solely on the colonel. This was Su Lin. Chin Wei's entire demeanor changed. The sternness in his face softened, replaced by a gentleness I hadn't thought him capable of. "This is Lin Yu from the countryside," he said to her, his voice flat once more. Su Lin smiled, a practiced, perfect curve of her lips. She extended a delicate hand to me. "Hello, I'm Su Lin." Before I could take it, Chin Wei gently pulled her hand back. "She's just come from the village. Her hands are dirty from the fields." The dismissal was absolute, the insult deliberate. At that moment the little boy ran to Chin Wei and clung to his leg. "Papa Chin, take me and Mama to the park." Chin Wei scooped him up without hesitation. "All right, let's go." The 3 of them, a perfect picture of a family, began to walk away. Chin Wei paused and looked back at me, his face cold again. "What you suggested I will not consider. I will not call off the engagement, but we can wait until you graduate to marry. Tomorrow I will have the school issue your proof." He called out to the housekeeper. "Auntie Wang, prepare a guest room for her." Then he was gone, following Su Lin and her son. I stood alone in the vast living room, a whirlwind of emotions warring inside me. Relief because I had secured my chance at an education. Anger at his casual cruelty. And a steely resolve. He thought he was keeping me here to eventually become his docile wife. He had no idea he had just let a wolf in sheep's clothing through his door. I would get my education and I would find a way to break these chains. This time my life was my own. The guest room Auntie Wang showed me to was spacious but Spartan, a world away from the cramped mud hut I had called home. A simple bed, a wooden desk, a wash basin. It was clean, impersonal, and felt more like a cell than a bedroom. But it was a roof over my head and it was in the city. For now that was enough. That first night, I lay awake on the hard mattress, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the city. The distant rumble of a truck, the faint echo of a radio from another house. My mind raced, plotting my next moves. Chin Wei had agreed to get me into university, but he had also made it clear I was not to leave his household. I was trapped in a gilded cage, my freedom contingent on my compliance. The next morning I was up before dawn. I found Auntie Wang in the kitchen, a kind-faced woman with weary eyes. I offered to help with breakfast, not out of servitude, but as a way to learn the rhythms of the house and earn a sliver of goodwill. "No, no, Miss Lin," she said, flustered. "The colonel would not like that. You are a guest." "A guest who needs to earn her keep," I replied softly, already picking up a knife to help chop the vegetables. She looked at me with a mixture of surprise and pity, but didn't stop me. Chin Wei joined us for breakfast, his presence sucking all the air from the room. He ate in silence, his posture perfect, his movements economical. He barely glanced at me. When he was done he stood. "The matter with the university is settled," he announced, his tone implying it was a minor administrative task, not the life-altering favor it was for me. "You will begin classes when the new semester starts. Until then you will stay here." "Thank you, Colonel Chin," I said, bowing my head slightly. "I am grateful." His eyes narrowed as if searching for sarcasm in my words. Finding none, he gave a curt nod and left for his duties. As soon as he was gone, the atmosphere lightened. But not for long. Su Lin glided into the dining room, her son little Ming trailing behind her. She was even more beautiful in the morning light, her skin flawless, her city-style dress hugging her slender frame. "Auntie Wang, my porridge is cold," she said, her voice a light complaint. "I'll warm it right away, Miss Su," Auntie Wang said, hurrying to the stove. Su Lin's eyes then fell on me. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Lin, I trust you slept well? Country life must make one accustomed to rough living. I hope the bed wasn't too hard for you." "It was perfectly adequate, thank you," I replied, meeting her gaze evenly. I would not be cowed by her. Her smile tightened. "Qin Wei is a man of his word. It's so kind of him to help you like this. He has such a strong sense of responsibility." The implication was clear. His help was born of duty, not any regard for me. "I am aware," I said simply, turning back to my tea. This pattern established itself over the following weeks. Qin Wei was largely absent, a distant, intimidating figure. Su Lin, however, was a constant, subtle presence. Her tactics were not overtly hostile. They were far more insidious. She would accidentally misplace things and ask me to help her look for them for hours. She developed a sudden need for tea at all hours, which I was expected to fetch. She complained of aches and pains, requesting that I massage her shoulders. The worst, the most humiliating ritual began that first week. "Lin Yu," she said one evening, a sweet smile on her face. "My feet are so sore from walking in the city all day. Would you be a dear and prepare a foot bath for me and little Ming? A country girl like you must be used to hard work." The request was a test, a way to establish dominance. I felt a hot flush of anger rise to my cheeks. I was a university student, not a servant. But I bit my tongue. I remembered Qin Wei's second condition. He would provide materially but expected compliance. Arguing with Su Lin would be seen as causing trouble, as ingratitude. It could jeopardize my university spot. So I swallowed my pride. I boiled the water, carried the heavy basin to her room, and knelt to place it before her. As I washed her delicate, perfectly manicured feet, she sighed with contentment. "You have such capable hands," she murmured. "It must be so difficult living a life of such labor. You're lucky Qin Wei is giving you a way out." I said nothing, focusing on the task, building a wall of silence inside my mind. This was temporary. This was the price of my freedom. When I moved on to little Ming, the boy looked at me with his mother's cunning eyes. "You're rough," he whined, splashing water on me. "I want Mama to do it." "Hush, Ming," Su Lin chided gently, but she was smiling. "Lin Yu is doing her best. We must be patient with people from the countryside." This became our nightly routine. A daily exercise in humiliation designed to break my spirit. But instead of breaking me, it hardened my resolve. Every insult, every condescending remark, was fuel for my determination to escape. Finally, the semester began. Stepping onto the campus of Capital University was like breathing fresh air after a lifetime in a musty cellar. The energy, the buzz of intellectual curiosity, the sight of other young people clutching books. It was everything I had dreamed of. I was assigned to the Department of Electronic Mechanics, my first choice major, a field that had called to me since I was a child tinkering with my father's broken radio. I threw myself into my studies with a ferocity that surprised my professors. While other students were socializing, I was in the library. While they discussed politics and poetry, I was buried in circuit diagrams and engineering textbooks. I was years older in spirit, and I had no time to waste. My natural aptitude, honed by a lifetime of practical experience, quickly became apparent. I understood the principles of electronics intuitively. It was a language I had always spoken. Professor Deng, my advisor, a stern man with a brilliant mind, took notice. "Your practical application is remarkable, Miss Lin," he said one day after class, peering at me over his spectacles. "Your theoretical knowledge is behind, but your hands understand the machinery." "I've had some experience, Professor," I replied modestly. He nodded. "See me after your lectures tomorrow. I have a research project that could use someone with your instincts." It was my first real break. Involvement in a professor's project meant not only academic credit but often a small stipend. I could start saving money, my own money, to repay Qin Wei and secure my independence. Balancing university life with the oppressive atmosphere of the Qin household was a delicate dance. I spent as little time there as possible, leaving early and returning late. I took on part-time work, first at a small library and then leveraging my skills at a radio repair shop on the outskirts of the city. The shop owner, a grizzled old man named Master Lu, was skeptical of a female university student at first, but when I fixed a complex Japanese transistor radio in under an hour, his skepticism turned to grudging respect. "You've got the touch, girl," he grunted, handing me a few yuan. "You come back when you can." Life was a grueling cycle of study, work, and the dreaded return to the Qin residence. But I was building something brick by brick. A foundation for a life that was truly mine. One evening, I returned to the house later than usual, exhausted after a long shift at Master Lu's shop. It was that time of the month and cramps twisted my stomach into knots. All I wanted was to collapse onto my bed. But Su Lin was waiting for me. "Lin, you're late. Mine and little Ming's feet are waiting." A wave of nausea washed over me. "Not tonight, Su Lin. I'm not feeling well." Her face for a fleeting second showed surprise then hardened. "I wasn't asking. Qin Wei expects you to help around the house. This is your responsibility." The sheer entitlement, the casual cruelty snapped something inside me. The carefully constructed wall of patience I had built crumbled. "I am not your servant." The words erupted from me, sharp and loud in the quiet hallway. "You have 2 working hands. Wash your own feet." The moment the words left my mouth, I knew it was a mistake. But the frustration of weeks, of 2 lifetimes, was too much to contain. Su Lin's eyes widened in theatrical shock. Little Ming, who had been watching, suddenly burst into tears. "Bad woman," he screamed, pointing at me. "You're yelling at my mama." "You see." Su Lin gathered her son to her, her voice trembling with feigned hurt. "This is the thanks we get. We open our home to you and you show such venom to a child." It was a masterful performance. And as fate would have it, it was at that exact moment that the front door opened and Qin Wei walked in. He took in the scene in an instant. Me standing defiant, my face flushed with anger and pain. Su Lin and little Ming, the picture of victimized innocence. The unused foot basin sitting between us. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. His eyes, dark with fury, locked onto me. "Lin Yu." His voice was dangerously quiet. "What is the meaning of this?" "She refused to help us," little Ming wailed. "She was mean to Mama." Su Lin looked down, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "It's my fault, Qin Wei. I asked too much of her. I forget that not everyone has the same upbringing." That was all it took. Qin Wei crossed the room in 3 long strides. Before I could react, his hand shot out and struck me hard across the face. The sound was a sharp crack in the silence. My head snapped to the side, my cheek exploding in white-hot pain. I staggered back, my hand flying to my face, staring at him in utter shock. I had known he was capable of violence, but feeling it was a different, more terrifying thing. "My brother died saving me," he growled, his voice shaking with a rage that seemed disproportionate to the situation. "We owe his wife and son a debt that can never be repaid. You, living under my roof, receiving an education because of my generosity, and you dare to be cruel to them? You are spiteful and ungrateful." Tears of pain and humiliation welled in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I would not give him or her that satisfaction. I lowered my hand, revealing the red hand-shaped mark on my cheek. I looked him dead in the eye, my own voice cold and steady despite the tremor in my soul. "Qin Wei," I said, his name feeling like poison on my tongue. "The debt is yours, not mine. I owe you for my education and I will repay it. But I am not obligated to be a punching bag for your guilt or her malice. What right do you have to treat me like this?" His jaw tightened, a muscle twitching. "Because you are my fiancé," he spat as if the word itself was distasteful. "A wife follows her husband's will. And marrying me is a privilege far above your station. Caring for my benefactor's family is your duty, not bullying. I didn't know you were so delicate." Behind him, I saw the ghost of a smile on Su Lin's lips. She had won this round. But as I stood there, my face throbbing, I knew this changed everything. The fragile truce was shattered. The gloves were off. I could no longer stay in this viper's nest. My studies were secure, my reputation at the university was growing. It was time to make my move. The gilded cage had just become a prison and I was ready to pick the lock. The sting of Qin Wei's slap lingered on my skin for days, a constant burning reminder of my precarious position. But more than the physical pain, it was the chilling clarity it brought. There would be no reasoning with him, no appealing to a sense of fairness. In his mind, I was an asset, an obligation, and now a disobedient one. I could not wait until graduation. I had to leave now. The following weeks were a flurry of clandestine activity. I redoubled my efforts at the repair shop, taking on every job Master Lu would give me. I saved every spare jiao, the coins adding up with agonizing slowness. Professor Deng, noticing my increased focus, and perhaps the faint shadow of a bruise I tried to conceal with my hair, offered me a paid position as a research assistant on a new project involving early satellite communication components. It was complex, groundbreaking work, and the stipend was a lifeline. I began spending even more time on campus, often studying late into the night in the library, using the excuse of impending exams. Qin Wei, preoccupied with his military duties and, I suspected, soothed by Su Lin's poisonous whispers, seemed barely to notice my extended absences. I was a ghost in his house, a problem he had temporarily shelved. My goal was the university dormitory. I made discreet inquiries and learned that a transfer was possible, especially for students demonstrating academic excellence and financial need. With Professor Deng's backing, I submitted a formal application, citing the long and costly commute from the Qin residence. I held my breath, praying the administration would not feel the need to consult my fiancé. During this tense period, an unexpected and unwelcome disruption arrived at the Qin family's grand door. My mother and Mei Ling. I was in the backyard attempting to enjoy a rare moment of peace, when Auntie Wang hurried out, her face anxious. "Miss Lin, your family is here." A cold dread settled in my stomach. I walked into the main living room to find them standing there, looking utterly out of place amidst the refined furnishings. My mother's eyes were sharp, darting around, calculating the value of everything she saw. Mei Ling, she looked broken. The vibrant, cunning sister who had so confidently chosen Feng Jian was gone. In her place was a haggard woman, her face a mosaic of yellowing bruises, her spirit visibly crushed. Qin Wei, ever the dutiful host, was there, his posture stiff. He had clearly been intercepted upon returning home. "Mother-in-law," he said, the term sounding foreign on his lips. "To what do we owe this visit?" My mother didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Colonel Qin, when do you plan to make an honest woman of my daughter? She has been living here for months without a marriage certificate. People will talk. It brings shame on our family." I saw Qin Wei's jaw tighten. He disliked being pressured. Before I could speak, he surprised me. He stepped closer to me and slipped a light, possessive arm around my waist. The gesture was so unexpected, so utterly false, that I froze. "Mother-in-law," he said, his voice a carefully controlled calm. "Of course we will marry. But I respect Lin Yu's wishes. She wants to finish her university education first. We will wed after she graduates." The lie was delivered with such smooth authority that even I almost believed it. But my mother was not so easily swayed. Her eyes, sharp with greed and desperation, narrowed. Hearing that the delay was my fault, she turned her venom on me. "You shameless girl," she shrieked, her finger jabbing toward my face. "Living unwed in a man's house. You have no honor. You think you're too good for your family now? You forget the breast that fed you." The change in Qin Wei was instantaneous and terrifying. The calm facade shattered. A vein throbbed in his temple, and his eyes glazed over with a dark, familiar fury. He could not stand a woman's screaming. It was his trigger. "Enough," he roared, his voice echoing through the house like a gunshot. My mother's tirade cut off mid-screech, her mouth hanging open in shock. "She stays in the guest room," he snarled, pointing at me but glaring at my mother. "This house will not tolerate such vulgar, shameless cursing. One more word and you will be thrown out." The silence that followed was absolute. My mother, for the first time in her life, was struck dumb with fear. In that moment I felt a confusing, unwelcome spark of gratitude toward Qin Wei. He had, in his own brutal way, defended me. But Mei Ling, seething with jealousy and misery, saw an opportunity to poison the well. She put on a syrupy, false tone. "Brother-in-law, please don't be angry with my sister. She is just stubborn." Then, her voice dripping with fake concern, she added, I heard there is another woman and child living here? A widow." Qin Wei's head snapped toward me, his eyes blazing with accusation. He believed I had been gossiping, airing his private shame. The Chin family has no widow and child. He bit out, each word sharp as a blade. Only the family of my benefactor. He then turned his furious gaze back to me, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Lin Yu, I defended your dignity in front of your family and you repay me by slandering my household? It seems you truly cannot stand Su Lin and little Ming. The brief flicker of gratitude died. He would always believe the worst of me. I never said a word to them, I retorted, my own anger rising to meet his. Believe what you want. If you cannot tolerate your benefactor's family, that is your concern. I never asked for this qualification. We were supposed to part in 2 years anyway. I had never openly defied him so directly. The air crackled with tension. His fists clenched, the cords in his neck standing out. He looked triumphantly at Mei Ling, whose provocation had worked perfectly. Seeing the situation spiraling, my mother, who still hadn't gotten any money, lunged at me. She grabbed my collar, her fingers like claws. This is your fault. You've angered him. Give me money. Your sister needs it to pay off Feng Jian's debts. That was the final straw. The last vestige of familial duty I felt evaporated. I tore her hand from my collar. Why should I give you anything? My voice was ice. You gave birth to me, but you never raised me with love. Father raised me. After he died, I supported this family. The food we ate, the clothes we wore, I earned them. And you took every jiao and gave it to her. I pointed at Mei Ling. When I was 10, you gave my winter coat to her and left me in rags. She got a rash and you beat me for sabotaging the clothes. You remember none of that. Well, consider this my official notice. We are cut off. You can fend for yourselves. My mother, enraged and desperate, collapsed into a wailing heap on the floor, screaming about my unfilial nature, cursing me to a wretched future. The screaming, the chaos, it was too much for Qinwei. His PTSD took over. Get them out, he bellowed to Auntie Wang and the other servants. Get them out of my sight. They are never to set foot here again. The servants hurried to comply, physically ushering my weeping mother and shell-shocked Mei Ling toward the door. As she was dragged out, Mei Ling turned a hysterical, hate-filled face to me. Lin Yu, what trick did you pull? Why is he defending you? Why is Feng Jian a worthless gambling bum? This wasn't supposed to happen. I looked at her, my sister, my rival across 2 lifetimes, and I felt nothing but a profound, weary pity. Mei Ling, I said, my voice quiet but clear. You can't pin your life on anyone else. Aren't you depending on Qinwei? On his family? She shrieked. Just wait. Your life won't be any better than mine. I shook my head. I won't depend on anyone. I will be fine. Then I turned my back and closed the door on my past. The confrontation had a silver lining. The chaos provided the perfect cover for my escape. A week later, my dormitory transfer was approved. I received the notification at the university, a small slip of paper that felt like a pardon from a death sentence. I went back to the Qin house one final time while Qinwei was away. I packed my few belongings, my clothes, my father's radio, my textbooks. As I passed Su Lin's room, I heard her consoling him, her voice sweet as honey. Don't be angry, Qinwei. Country people are all the same. Greedy, shameless. They have no concept of manners or dignity. In the end, they're nothing but mud, dirtying themselves and everyone else. Anne Qinwei, my supposed fiancée, simply sighed and said, You are always so sensible, Su Lin. So educated and understanding. I smiled, a bitter, cold smile. They deserved each other. May they be happy together for 100 years. I left without a word to anyone, taking a bus across the city to the university dormitories. The room I was assigned was tiny, shared with 3 other girls, and cramped. But it was mine. I was free. It took a week for Qinwei to realize I was gone. I was walking out of a lecture on advanced circuit theory when the gate guard called my name. Miss Lin. Someone is here to see you. My heart sank. I knew who it was. He was leaning against a military green jeep parked arrogantly at the university gates, a cigarette dangling from his fingers. He looked imposing, out of place amidst the flow of students. When he saw me, he stubbed out the cigarette and strode over, his expression dark. Come back with me, he commanded as if I were a stray pet. No, I said, my voice firm. I promised you could take care of Su Lin and little Ming for 4 years. It was a statement, a reminder of our bargain. I'll find another way to repay your favor, I countered. But I will not take care of them. You have a house full of servants. Why must you use them to torment me? I looked at him, truly bewildered. If you love her, fight for her. Talk to your parents. Don't torture yourself and everyone else. He grew furious. How many times must I say it? They are the family of my benefactor. It is only right that we care for them. Is it gratitude? I asked, my gaze unwavering. Or is it an excuse to indulge your own feelings? His face flushed a dark red. He pointed a finger at me. You may have come from the countryside, but you are receiving an education now. Why is your heart still as narrow as a village woman's? The absurdity of it finally broke my patience. For the first time I addressed him as an equal. Chin-Wei, I said, my voice ringing clear in the open air. First, I have no interest in you, so this is not jealousy. Second, yes, I am from the countryside, but country people are people. There are good and bad just like in the city. Stop using it as an insult. And lastly, maybe I'm not accomplished, but I am honest. I know what I want. Unlike you, saying one thing, feeling another, lying to yourself and tormenting others. A man can't be so greedy. You can't have it all. I expected an explosion. But instead his clenched fists slowly uncurled. The anger on his face faded, replaced by something I had never seen before, a look of profound defeat. After a long silence he finally spoke, his voice quiet, almost vulnerable. Lin, did you never, not even once, consider marrying me? I hesitated for a few seconds, then lifted my head to meet his gaze. Never, I said, the truth stark and simple. His eyes, those dark obsidian chips, seemed to shatter. Don't you dare say never again, he roared, but the fury was hollow, masking a desperation that shook me for a moment. He grabbed my arm, his grip bruising. Never. Never, I repeated, pulling my arm free. I turned and walked back through the university gates, leaving him standing there on the sidewalk. I didn't look back. The cage was open and I was never going back. Freedom was a heady, terrifying thing. The university dormitory, with its peeling paint and the constant chatter of my roommates, felt like a palace. For the first few weeks, I walked around in a state of heightened awareness, savoring the simple pleasure of choosing when to eat, when to sleep, and where to go. No one demanded I wash their feet. No one watched me with jealous, calculating eyes. I was gloriously, blessedly alone in a crowd of striving young minds. My focus became absolute. I lived in the library and the laboratory. Professor Deng's project on satellite components was my sanctuary. The world of resistors, capacitors, and fragile circuit boards was logical and pure. It obeyed fixed laws. It didn't slap you for speaking your mind or manipulate you with tears. I buried myself in the work, my hands, stained with solder and grease, finally feeling useful again. My reputation grew. I was no longer just the clever country girl. I was Lin Yu, the prodigy from the Department of Electronic Mechanics. I won the National University Skills Competition, my name printed in the campus newspaper. I knew Chin-Wei's parents, the elder Mr. and Mrs. Chin, saw it. They began to visit me at the university, their initial polite interest warming into genuine affection. I felt a pang of guilt. They were good people, trapped by tradition and their son's obstinacy. I knew they saw me as the ideal daughter-in-law, educated, accomplished, and from a humble background that ensured compliance. They had no idea their son and I had a nuclear bomb of a broken engagement ticking between us. I repaid their kindness not with false promises, but with genuine care. I visited their home, never when Chin-Wei was there, bringing them small gifts with my hard-earned money, a quality tea set, a fine wool scarf for the winter. I played chess with Mr. Chin and listened to Mrs. Lewis talk about her garden. It was a debt I felt I owed, a connection I was reluctant to sever completely. This fragile peace lasted until my senior year. Mr. Chin was turning 50, and Mrs. Chin personally called me, her voice warm, insisting I come to the family celebration. The guilt and a lingering fondness for them made me agree. I spent a small fortune on a fine inkstone I knew he coveted and prepared to step back into the lion's den. The Chin house felt smaller, the air thicker than I remembered. Su Lin was already there, holding court in the living room, little Ming performing tricks for his grandparents. The Chens were polite, but I saw the faint strain around Mrs. Chen's eyes. I slipped away to the kitchen, where a flustered Auntie Wang was trying to manage the feast. "Let me help," I said, rolling up my sleeves. Cooking was a meditation, a familiar rhythm from a life I had left behind. I made Mrs. Chen's favorite sweet and sour pork ribs, the tangy scent filling the kitchen. During the meal, Mrs. Chen praised the dish effusively. "Lin Yu, you've outdone yourself. It's perfectly seasoned." Su Lin's smile was a brittle thing. She picked at her food, her eyes darting around. Then she let out a theatrical gasp. What is that?" She pointed a trembling finger at the plate of ribs. There, nestled among the glistening meat, was a dead cockroach. The table fell silent. My blood ran cold. I remembered little Ming's furtive trips in and out of the kitchen earlier. This was a setup, clumsy but effective. Qin Wei's face darkened instantly. He turned to me, his expression full of reproach. "My mother's birthday and you insisted on cooking. This is the result." Before I could defend myself, Su Lin was on her feet, whisking the plate away. "It's not her fault, Qin Wei. He worked so hard. We should just be grateful for the effort, even if it's imperfect." Her performance as the magnanimous martyr was flawless. A cold laugh escaped me. I was tired of the play, tired of the lies. "A staged performance from beginning to end," I said, my voice cutting through the tense air. Qin Wei slammed his chopsticks on the table. The sound was like a gunshot. "Lin Yu, must you always be so disgraceful? You have the education of a scholar but the manners of a peasant." The words, meant to wound, bounced off the hardened shell I had built around myself. But the finality of the moment was upon me. This was the end. I would not ruin this kind man's birthday, but I would not stay silent either. I set my own chopsticks down carefully and stood. I bowed deeply to Mr. and Mrs. Chen. "Thank you for your kindness. You brought me to the city and I will always be grateful." Then I turned to Qin Wei. "And thank you, Colonel Qin, for the proof of admission. It was the key that unlocked my future." I took a deep breath, my heart hammering against my ribs. I looked at him, at the man who had been a cage and a key all at once. "The best way I can repay your favor," I said, my voice clear and steady, "is not to marry you. That way you and the one you truly love can be together without pretense." I turned back to his stunned parents and bowed again, deeper this time. "Uncle, Auntie, I formally ask you to release me from my engagement to your son. I will always honor you as if I were your daughter. But in this life I am not destined to be your daughter-in-law. Please grant me my freedom." The silence in the room was absolute. Mr. and Mrs. Chen stared at me, their faces a mask of shock and dawning understanding. Qin Wei's face went through a series of contortions. Shock, humiliation, and finally a raw, blistering anger. He had been publicly rejected. By a country girl. He gave a short, cold laugh. "Fine," he spat, the word laced with venom. "Let it be dissolved. I'll marry Su Lin." He shoved his chair back and stormed out of the room. As I gathered my things to leave, I saw the unmistakable flash of triumph in Su Lin's eyes. She had won her prize. I heard his parents begin to berate him as I walked out the door. "A fine, virtuous girl. And you drive her away for a widow and her child. Have you lost your mind? You shame this family." I understood then that their fondness for me was conditional. I was the suitable choice. Now that I was no longer compliant, I was expendable. It was a sobering but not surprising lesson. In this world, everyone acts in their own interest. A month later, as the top graduate in my department, I was summoned to a private meeting with Professor Deng and two serious men in plain suits. They represented a state-level research project, so secret it didn't have a name, only a code letter. It involved aerospace and national defense. They had reviewed my work, my competition results, and my background. They offered me a position. It meant disappearing. It meant cutting all ties, leaving my name behind and dedicating my life to something greater than myself. I didn't hesitate for a second. I signed the confidentiality agreement. Within a week, I was on a train heading south, my few belongings in a single bag. I was leaving Lin Yu, the country girl, the unwanted fiancée, behind. I was becoming someone else. Someone who belonged only to science and the stars. By the time Qin Wei, frantic and furious, scoured the city for me, I was already gone. Professor Deng, under strict orders, told him only that I had gone south. It was a vast, empty clue. The rumors that eventually trickled back to me through secure channels were grim. Qin Wei, driven by a mix of obligation and his own impulsive declaration, married Su Lin. The scandal of him marrying his benefactor's widow was immense. It smacked of impropriety, of a weakness his superiors could not overlook. He was passed over for promotion, his brilliant career stalling before it had truly begun. Su Lin, having achieved her goal, quickly grew discontent. She blamed him for his stalled career, for the gossip, for not being the powerful man she had thought she was marrying. The very temper she had once manipulated was now turned on her. His PTSD, untreated and exacerbated by his professional frustration, worsened. The fights were legendary. In a fit of rage, he struck her and she lost the sight in one eye. The incident was reported. Qin Wei was forcibly retired from active duty and committed to a military sanatorium. The great Colonel Qin Wei was broken, a prisoner of his own demons and his bad choices. Su Lin and little Ming remained in the old Qin house, living off the family's wealth, but they were pariahs. The golden cage had rusted shut and they were all trapped inside. When I heard the news, I felt a quiet, profound sadness. Not for the man he became, but for the tragic waste of it all. He was a man who never understood what he truly wanted until it was gone, and then he destroyed himself with the wanting. But I had no room in my life for his tragedy. My life, my real life, was just beginning. Under the southern sun, at a research base hidden from the world, I was helping to build rockets. The southern research base was a city unto itself. A sprawling complex of unmarked buildings, launch towers clawing at the sky, and a population of the brightest minds in the nation, all moving with a sense of urgent purpose. Here I was no longer Lin Yu, the girl from the village. I was Engineer Lin, designation K7. The work was all-consuming. We lived in a perpetual cycle of design, calculation, failure, and redesign. The physics was brutal, the engineering challenges Herculean. A misplaced decimal point, a material flaw invisible to the naked eye, could mean the loss of years of work and millions of yuan. The pressure was immense, a constant humming tension in the background of our lives. I thrived on it. This was a different kind of struggle from my past. Here the enemy was gravity, thermodynamics, the unforgiving vacuum of space. It was a clean fight. My experience with practical electronics, honed in Master Lu's shop, and my childhood tinkering, became invaluable. While theoretical physicists sketched equations on blackboards, my team and I were in the hangars, our hands deep in wiring harnesses and sensor arrays, translating those equations into cold, hard machinery. I worked alongside a man named Zhao Min. He was a propulsion specialist, a few years older than me, with a quiet intensity and eyes that crinkled at the corners when he solved a particularly stubborn problem. He was the first person who looked at me and saw only an engineer. There was no pity for my background, no curiosity about my past, only a deep professional respect for the quality of my work. We spent long nights together in the lab, the air thick with the smell of coffee and ozone from soldering irons. We would debate circuit paths with the passion of poets, our voices the only sound in the vast echoing space. Slowly, cautiously, a partnership formed. It was built not on passion or necessity, but on a shared, unshakable belief in what we were doing. The first stage separation is the key, he said one night, staring at a schematic spread across 2 desks. The vibration could shake the secondary avionics to pieces. Then we don't just cushion it, I replied, my finger tracing a line on the diagram. We isolate it. A dampening system here and here. A feedback loop that anticipates the shock wave. He looked at me, a slow smile spreading across his face. You see the machine not as parts but as a living thing. You feel its pulse. It was the greatest compliment I had ever received. Years blurred together. We celebrated New Year's in the control room, watching telemetry data instead of fireworks. We mourned failures together, the silent grief of a team that had poured its soul into a project, only to watch it explode on the launch pad or veer silently off course. Each failure was a lesson, a scar that made us smarter, more resilient. Through it all, I maintained a tenuous, secret link to my old life. Once a year on a secure line I would speak to Professor Deng. He was my tether, the only person who knew both Lin Yu and Engineer Lin. It was during one of these calls, as we were preparing for our most ambitious launch yet, the first manned mission, that he told me about Qin Wei. He found me, Lin Yu, the professor said, his voice heavy. He was a broken man. He drank too much. He said he fell in love with you the first moment he saw you. I froze, the receiver slick in my hand. When? December 7, 1977. The day of the reinstated exams. He was assigned to security at your testing hall. He saw a girl, trembling with cold, rushing in at the last second. He said there was a light in your eyes he'd never seen before. The memory, buried under years of struggle and purpose, surfaced with painful clarity. I remembered the cold. I remembered the desperation. I had been running from my mother, from a life of servitude. I never saw the soldier watching me. He used every means to bring you to his side, Professor Deng continued. He was afraid you would leave for university and never look back. So he threatened you, tested you, tried to grind you down. He thought 4 years was enough to make you into the wife he wanted, to make you accept Su Lin's presence. He had planned to move them out after you were married. He thought he was molding you. I felt a wave of nausea. All the cruelty, the mind games, the humiliation, it had all been a warped, possessive strategy. He saw a wild bird and thought he could clip its wings and keep it in a gilded cage. He never understood that the light he saw in my eyes was the fire of a freedom he was trying to extinguish. He said it was his own fault, Professor Deng sighed. That you were right. He was too greedy. Said he misses you. He's in a bad way, Lin Yu. The news settled like a stone in my gut. There was no satisfaction in it, only a profound, weary sadness. His was a tragedy of his own making, a life lived according to duty and expectation, never authenticity, until it collapsed under the weight of its own contradictions. I thanked Professor Deng and hung up. I walked out of the communications building and looked up at the sky. It was a clear, starry night. The Milky Way was a shimmering river of dust. Out there in that infinite black was our destination. Our purpose. Zhao Min found me there, my face tilted to the heavens. The final pre-launch checks are complete, he said softly, standing beside me. She's ready. I nodded, the weight of Qin Wei's story fading in the face of our monumental task. We're ready. The day of the launch was a media blackout. There were no foreign journalists, no public fanfare. Only the team, the pilots, and the silent, watchful eyes of the nation's leadership via secure video feed. The rocket stood on the pad, a needle of white against the piercing blue sky, condensation pouring off its sides like sweat. In the control room, the air was so thick with tension you could taste it. The countdown began, a calm female voice marking the passage of seconds towards destiny. 3. Ignition. Liftoff. A pillar of fire and smoke erupted from the base of the rocket. It rose slowly at first, defying the immense grip of the Earth. Then it picked up speed, a roaring, thundering arrow shooting for the stars. The sound was a physical force, vibrating through the concrete under our feet and deep into our bones. I watched the telemetry screens, my heart in my throat. My systems, the ones I had designed, built, and tested, were the nerve center of this beast. They were reporting back a stream of data that was a song of perfect health. Stage 1 separation, nominal. Stage 2 ignition, nominal. Payload shroud jettison, nominal. Tears streamed down my face unchecked. They were not tears of joy but of release. Of vindication. This was my answer to everyone who had ever tried to define me, to limit me, to own me. My mother, Feng Jian, Qin Wei, they were ghosts from another lifetime. The roaring ascent into the unknown was my life. The rocket became a bright star, then a pinprick, and then it was gone, swallowed by the atmosphere on its way to orbit. The control room erupted. There were no cheers, not yet. The mission was only beginning, but a collective, shuddering exhalation of relief and triumph. People hugged, clapped each other on the back, their faces etched with a sublime exhaustion. Zhao Min turned to me. His eyes, usually so calm and focused, were shining. Without a word, he reached out and took my hand. His grip was firm, warm, real. It was an anchor in the sea of euphoria. In that moment, surrounded by the hum of machinery and the quiet, fervent energy of my colleagues, I knew I had reached a summit I had never dared to dream of in my first life. I had not just built a fortune for someone else. I had helped push the boundaries of humanity. I had touched the sky. The descent of Qin Wei was a tragedy written in the past. My ascent, our ascent, was a story being written in the stars. And it was only the beginning. Success was not a destination, but a new plateau from which to aim even higher. The triumph of the first manned mission cemented our team's status. Awards came, but they were given in private ceremonies, our names and faces kept from the public. We were ghosts building miracles for the glory of the nation. I preferred it that way. The anonymity was a shield. With the core mission achieved, the work evolved. We weren't just trying to reach space. We were trying to understand it, to stay there, to build a presence. My focus shifted to long-term life support systems and more sophisticated communication arrays. Xiaomin and I became co-leads of a new division, our professional partnership the bedrock of the project. Our personal relationship deepened with a quiet, steady certainty. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic confessions. One evening, after another marathon session, he walked me back to my quarters as usual. But instead of a curt goodnight, he paused under the dim light of a security lamp. "Lin Yu," he said, his voice low. "This life we have chosen, it is not a normal one. Demands everything. There is little room for traditional things." "I know," I replied. I had lived a traditional life. I had no desire to return to one. "I was never good at traditional things anyway," he continued, a faint smile touching his lips. "But I cannot imagine continuing this work, this life, without you beside me. Not as just a colleague." He didn't ask me to marry him. He asked me to partner with him. It was a proposal tailored for the woman I was. "Yes," I said. The word was simple, and it felt more right than any vow I could have taken in a previous life. We formalized it in the most utilitarian way possible, signing papers in a base administrator's office. There was no ceremony, no family to notify. We told Professor Deng in our annual call, and his joy was palpable. "Two of my best minds," he kept saying, "building a future together." It was the only blessing we needed or wanted. We never had children. The base had a small school for the families of personnel, but we made a conscious choice. The project was our child, our legacy. We poured all our energy, all our love, into the steel and circuitry of the rockets that carried our nation's dreams. It was a complete and fulfilling life, one I had carved out for myself with my own two hands. Years turned into decades. I was in my late 40s when I received a call from a rehabilitation center in the north. The voice on the line was professionally polite. "Engineer Lin? We have a patient here, a Mr. Chinwei. He is in the final stages of a terminal illness. He has been asking for you. He says it's his last wish." The name was an echo from a tomb. I had not thought of him in years. I looked across our small book-filled living unit at Xiaomin. He was reviewing a set of blueprints, his reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked up, sensing my stillness. "Who was it?" he asked. "The sanatorium," I said quietly. "Chinwei is dying. He wants to see me." Xiaomin set down his pen. He knew the broad strokes of my past, the cage I had escaped. He never pressed for details. Now he simply said, "The choice is yours. But if you need to close that door to be at peace, then you should go." I knew he was right. The ghost of Chinwei had lingered for too long. I needed to lay it to rest, not for him but for myself. I took a military transport north. The convalescent home was a stark, clean place that smelled of antiseptic and boiled cabbage. A nurse led me to a private room. The man in the bed was a skeleton draped in papery skin. It was barely recognizable as the proud, formidable Colonel Chinwei. His hair was white and thin, his body shrunken. His eyes, once so sharp and commanding, were cloudy and sunken. But they focused on me as I entered, and a spark of the old intensity flickered within them. "Lin Yu," he whispered, his voice a dry rustle. "Chinwei," I said, pulling a chair to his bedside. He struggled to sit up, and I helped him, propping the pillows behind his back. His body was frighteningly light. "December 7th, 1977, he began, his breath labored. "My unit was assigned to protect the exam hall. I saw a girl, trembling with cold, rushing in at the last second. She was out of breath, but there was a light in her eyes. A fire. I'd never seen anything like it. I fell in love with you at first sight." He paused, gathering strength. "I used everything, my power, my influence, to bring you to my side. In the previous life your sister took your place. In this one, it was finally you." A tear escaped from the corner of his eye and traced a path through the wrinkles on his cheek. "But I was afraid. Afraid you would leave for university and never look back. So I threatened you. I tested you. I thought 4 years was enough to make you accept your place, to make you see that Su Lin was no threat. I thought I was molding you into the wife I needed." He was confessing to a crime I had already deduced. Hearing it from his dying lips didn't bring anger, only a deep, hollow pity. "It was my fault," he rasped, his voice gaining a desperate strength. "I did wrong. I was too greedy. I missed you, and I pushed you away with my own hands. His trembling, skeletal hand reached out from under the blanket, groping for mine. I let him take it. His skin was cold. "Lin Yu," he pleaded, his eyes boring into mine with a final desperate hope. "All my life, I've wanted to ask you. If there had been no Su Lin back then, would you have chosen me? Would there have been, even a tiny chance, you would have stayed?" He was asking for absolution. For a fantasy to comfort him in his final moments. He wanted to believe that his methods were the only thing that stood between him and happiness. I looked at him, this broken man who had once held my entire future in his hands. I saw the tragic arc of his life. A life lived by the rules of duty and possession. A life that had collapsed because he never understood the first thing about love or freedom. Before I could form an answer, the hand holding mine went limp. The desperate light in his eyes flickered and went out. His head lolled to the side. Chinwei was gone. He died without ever hearing my answer. And as I sat there in the stark silence of the room, I knew it was for the best. The answer was no. There was never a chance. Not without Su Lin, not with 1,000 Su Lins. The cage was the cage and I was born to fly. His question had been the final echo of a life I had left behind. Now the echo had faded into silence. I stood, gently placing his hand back on the blanket. I felt a quiet clarity, a chapter finally, definitively closed. He never understood that the things he couldn't let go of, duty, possession, guilt, were the very things I had shed to reach for the stars. I walked out of the room, out of the building and into the pale northern sunlight. I didn't look back. I had a rocket to check on, a team waiting for me, and a husband who understood that the greatest love was not about possession, but about setting each other free to soar. The world outside our high-walled base changed dramatically. China opened up, reformed, and exploded onto the global stage. The economic tides that had once made Feng Jian a millionaire now lifted millions. But from my isolated perch, it was a distant rumble. Our work remained constant. The relentless, quiet pursuit of the next frontier. Zhao Min and I grew older together, our hair streaked with gray, the lines on our faces mapping decades of concentration and shared worry. Our lives were a tapestry woven with the threads of complex equations, the roar of rocket engines, and the deep, quiet comfort of a partnership that needed no words. We received news from the outside world through filtered channels. Professor Deng passed away peacefully in his sleep, and I mourned the man who had been my first and greatest mentor. Through him I had learned snippets about my blood family. My mother had died years earlier, bitter and resentful until the end, still believing the brilliant life she saw on television. Glimpses of our successes in carefully edited newsreels should have been Mei Ling's. She never understood that it was a life that could not be given, only earned. Mei Ling's fate was a sordid tragedy. Feng Jian, the man she had chosen for his supposed fortune, had never changed. His gambling debts mounted, and in a desperate bid for money, he was arrested for running a brothel. In the process, he infected Mei Ling with an incurable disease. She was left alone, shunned by the village, her health and spirit broken. She lived out her days in the same mud hut we had grown up in, a prisoner of her own bad choice, pouring her venom into letters to a mother who was no longer there to listen. The sister who had fought me across 2 lifetimes had been ultimately defeated by her own greed and short-sightedness. I felt a distant pang for the girl she had once been, but no hatred. Her story was a cautionary tale, a reminder of the path I had narrowly escaped. My connection to the Qin family also reached its end. After Qin Wei's death, his parents, broken by their son's downfall and early death, passed away within a year of each other. The grand house was sold, the proceeds, I heard, largely absorbed by Su Lin and her son before they faded into obscurity. The mighty Qin lineage, once so concerned with face and reputation, ended not with a bang but a whimper. These were the echoes of my past, growing fainter with each passing year. My present, my reality was the mission. In my 60s, long after many of my contemporaries had retired, I was still in the command center, my voice calm over the comms as we guided probes to the moon and began assembling our first space station. I was no longer on the front lines of hands-on engineering, but my experience, my intuition for the machines, was considered invaluable. I had become an elder stateswoman of the stars, a living library of our program's history. Zhao Min and I would often walk along the perimeter of the base at night, looking up at the constellations we were now helping to populate. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened?" he asked me one night, his hand finding mine in the darkness. If you had taken the other path, the one with the business and the money. I thought of the gilded misery of my first life, the emptiness of being a jewel in someone else's crown. I thought of the loneliness, the betrayal, the slow death of the spirit. No, I said, and it was the absolute truth. Not for a single moment. That life was a shadow. I squeezed his hand and looked up at the bright, steady pinprick of our space station passing overhead. This is real. We had created a legacy, but not one of personal wealth or a family name. Our legacy was etched in the orbits of satellites, in the footprints on lunar soil, in the silent, majestic dance of spacecraft in the void. We had helped lift the eyes of a nation to the heavens. On the eve of the launch of our most advanced interplanetary probe, the one that would journey to Mars, the base director called me into his office. "Engineer Lin," he said, his expression uncharacteristically soft. "This project, it owes more to you than to perhaps anyone else. Your work on the communication systems is the only thing that will keep it tethered to us across the millions of kilometers." He handed me a small velvet box. Inside, on a bed of satin, was a medal. It was simple, unadorned, made of a metal that had been forged in the heart of one of our earliest rockets. There was no inscription, no fancy scroll work. It was a token of gratitude from the program itself, known only to a handful of people. It was worth more to me than any billion-yuan fortune. That night, as I stood beside Zhao Min in the control room, watching the probe begin its long, lonely journey to the Red Planet, I felt a sense of completion. A profound, quiet peace. I had done what I set out to do. I had taken my destiny into my own hands and had flown farther than I ever dreamed possible. The little girl shivering in the cold, the young woman washing another's feet, the betrayed wife of a wealthy man, they were all ghosts. The woman I was now, Engineer Lin, partner to Zhao Min, a builder of starships, was the only reality that had ever truly mattered. My life had not been easy, but it had been mine. And it had been magnificent. Time, the one force even our rockets could not conquer, began to slow its march for me. The years settled in my bones as a gentle ache, and the frantic pace of the base gradually became a rhythm I observed more than led. I officially retired at 70, though retirement on the base was a relative term. I still had an office, a place in the command center for major launches, and a steady stream of young, bright-eyed engineers who would come to me with their problems, treating my intuition with a reverence that both amused and humbled me. Zhao Min retired a year after I did. Our lives, so long dictated by mission clocks and launch windows, suddenly opened into a vast, quiet space. We filled it with long walks, with rereading our favorite books on physics and history, and with tending a small vegetable garden behind our quarters. A strangely grounding hobby for two people who had spent their lives reaching for the cosmos. One afternoon we were watching a live feed of a new crew docking with the Tiangong space station, a project whose early blueprints were stained with our coffee and marked with our notes. The technology was leaps and bounds ahead of what we had started with: sleek touchscreens instead of our clunky buttons, AI-assisted systems instead of our manual calculations. But the fundamental principles, the spirit of the thing felt familiar. It was our child all grown up. "We built well," Zhao Min said, his voice soft with pride. "We built a foundation," I corrected gently. "They are building the cathedral." He smiled, taking my hand. His grip was still firm, though his skin was now as lined as my own. "The foundation is the most important part." The past was truly a foreign country now. The village of my birth had likely been swallowed by urban sprawl. The names Feng Jian, Mei Ling, Qin Wei, and Su Lin were like characters from a sad, forgotten folk tale. The bitterness had long since faded, leaving behind only the clean, sharp lessons they had taught me about the price of dependency and the value of self-reliance. My body began to tire more easily. The walks grew shorter, the hours spent in the garden less frequent. I knew the signs. I had lived a long, full life, more than double the years of my first sorrowful incarnation. I had no complaints, only a deep, abiding gratitude. The end came quietly, as I suppose it should for someone who had lived surrounded by so much noise and fury. It was a peaceful evening. Zhao Min and I had been watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. We sat in comfortable silence on our small porch, a blanket shared across our laps. My breath grew shallow, a slow tide going out. I felt no fear. I looked at Zhao Min, my partner, my friend, the man who had never tried to cage me but had always given me the sky. His eyes, wise and gentle, met mine, and he understood. He held my hand tighter. My mind drifted not to the past but to the future. I thought of the probe we had sent to Mars, now a silent monument on the red soil. I thought of the space station, a constant winking star in the night sky. I thought of the young engineers with their bold plans for Jupiter, for the asteroids, for beyond. I had been a part of that. I had helped weave the thread of my nation's destiny into the great tapestry of space exploration. The little radio I had fixed as a girl had been a prelude to this. A lifetime of listening to and answering the call of the unknown. The last thing I saw was not the face of my mother, my sister, or my tormentors. It was not the grim face of Chin Wei or the triumphant smirk of Su Lin. It was a memory of pure, unadulterated joy. The sight of that first manned rocket, a pillar of fire climbing steadily, powerfully into the blue on its way to kiss the stars. A final thought floated through my consciousness, serene and absolute. The sky is not the limit. It is only the beginning. I closed my eyes and the universe, my true and only home, welcomed me back. In the quiet of the room, Xiao Min sat for a long time, holding the hand of the woman who had flown farther than any of them, his own heart full of a love as vast and silent as the space they had explored together. Outside, a new shift began in the command center, preparing for the next launch, the next journey, building on the foundation we had laid. The work, like the stars, was eternal. The end.